A workspace is a formal environment, and any unwanted intrusions that make working uncomfortable should not be permitted. People deal with this daily, and it's hard figuring out how to deal with the situation. In this video, we will show you how to deal with workplace harassment. Harassment can be said to be the use of intimidation, either subtle or otherwise, to demean, embarrass, or humiliate a person. Taking this context into the workplace, harassment creates an unproductive environment for the victim. And it can lead to bigger issues of depression as well as psychological and physical trauma. It is also important to note that workplace harassment also affects the company, and all employers should seek to create a safe environment for their employees. Unproductive employees slow down the growth of a business. The future repercussions of this workplace evil can serve to completely harm the reputation of a firm. Workplace harassment happens within the office, and it can cover a whole broach of subjects, some of which we will be discussing in this video. 1. Personal harassment. This form of harassment is a basic form of intimidation and bullying that is not predicated on the personal bias on sex, race, or religion. It is simply dealing with a bully. Unfortunately, this is not illegal but can have a rather negative impact on the individual it affects. 2. Discriminatory harassment. This form of harassment is generally based on the perpetrator's individual bias. It differs from other forms of workplace harassment, which are discriminatory in nature, by the intentions of the perpetrator. This form of harassment can happen in various ways. Gender-based discrimination, which involves discrimination based on a person's sex. Sexual orientation discrimination, which involves discrimination against a person due to their sexual orientation. Racial discrimination, discrimination against a person because of their culture, race, or ancestry. Religious discrimination is targeted towards an individual's religious beliefs. Age-based discrimination is usually discrimination against older workers within the company in a bid to push them to retire early. Disability-based discrimination is discrimination against the disabled. 3. Power harassment. Situations like this arise when someone higher up uses their position to intimidate and bully lower-ranked individuals in the workspace. It might pop up in a wide variety of ways. From overworking a subordinate way past their abilities to disparaging remarks intended to hurt. 4. Physical harassment. This form of harassment deals with physical interactions or threats meant to hurt the victim. Also known as workplace harassment, it can easily escalate to the point of assault and is most times not easily recognizable. Company policies on harassment should seek to show what forms of physical interactions qualify as physical harassment. 5. Cyberbullying. With the new age of the internet, most employers seek to increase productivity by utilizing new forms of technology. Unfortunately, this avenue has given way to a regularly used form of harassment that is now becoming a problem. Cyberbullying involves the harassment of an individual through the use of online avenues. That is social media and email. With the ability of people to access other people directly through their online spaces, cyberbullying is one form of harassment that also might be a problem to handle due to anonymity and the reach of the perpetrator. 6. Sexual harassment. This is one of the most common forms of workplace harassment. Sexual harassment is a regularly recurring issue that seems to be evident in almost all forms of working spaces. It involves situations in which an individual within the workspace is placed in a position with an unwanted sexual undertone. Now, contrary to what most people think, sexual harassment is not just a female problem but one that affects both genders. It's also not limited to physical contact alone. Sexual comments, as well as jokes and innuendo, can also make someone feel uncomfortable. Sending messages with sexual undertones can also constitute a hostile work environment. Sexual harassment happens to be one of the most common forms of workplace harassment, with 54% of women saying they have dealt with unwanted sexual advances. Unlike most forms of harassment that take a long period of time to be felt, the effect of this form of workplace harassment can be felt immediately. Sexual harassment can take two forms. Quid pro quo. A situation in which an individual is invited to engage in acts of a sexual nature with a superior in exchange for gain like a promotion or to prevent a loss like a demotion. Hostile work environment. A situation in which the individual is put under unfavorable conditions. This might not involve sexual activity and might deal with gender-based discriminatory attacks. One of the problems with sexual harassment is the lack of information on acceptable forms of interaction allowed within the workspace. How to deal with harassment as an employee. Dealing with workplace harassment takes a series of steps. They include 1. Confrontation. Confronting your bully has almost always been a problem for anyone in that situation. We know taking charge and calling out a person for their actions might be a bit worrisome, especially when the person in question happens to be a superior or your boss. But confrontation has to be done so as to ensure that all bases are covered, especially if the person causing the situation has no awareness that they are causing you trouble. Sometimes people are sincerely unaware that they are making you uncomfortable and simply think it's all fun. It's good to stand your ground and state your issue against their actions and words. This sets boundaries and enlightens the other person about the fact that they are overstepping. If this does not happen though and the perpetrator still continues to repeat the same action that keeps you in an uncomfortable situation, then other steps should be taken. 2. Report to human resources. With the regular discussion of workplace harassment and the number of legal situations documented on the news that happens in a lot of organizations, most firms and businesses have a system set up to handle situations on workplace harassment. This, most times, is handled by the Human Resources Department. If you happen to be dealing with it in your firm and you have taken the steps by yourself to handle it with no positive results, the next step would be to issue a complaint to the HR department. Be aware that sometimes the department might try to handle it in a manner that profits the company but issue the complaint anyway. Also, be sure to take a friend with you as well. That way, you have someone who knows of the situation and is on your side helping to confirm your story. 3. Gather evidence. Most times, in situations of workplace harassment, complaints usually need evidence to support your claim. While this might be a bit grueling to deal with for some people, it is smart to have a record of possible events and situations that have transpired which led to your sense of unease. That way, it is much easier for the firm to handle and call out the perpetrator. 4. Resignation. It's hard to consider, but this might be your only available option if after taking the steps mentioned earlier and no change is noticed. Your peace of mind is much more important. If the situation persists with no apparent change, it might be time for you to consider changing jobs as an alternative. 5. Taking legal action. Workplace harassment of any kind happens to be illegal in most countries. If you have tried all the steps already mentioned and no change has occurred, your next step might be to take legal action. This option does not appeal to everyone due to the chance of losing anonymity. So, one should be very sure before taking this step. When you do decide to sue the perpetuator, make sure you understand all the steps and follow through. For instance, to file a lawsuit, you must have reported to your employer and there's a time limit to these things. How to deal with harassment as an employer. As an employer of labor, it is important to ensure that your workspace is comfortable enough for your employees. It is therefore your job to ensure that all situations of workplace harassment are handled as soon as possible. 1. Create policies. Ensure that your workspace has rules and regulations in place to guide interactions between coworkers. Enforce these rules when the need arises and make sure to always update your regulations to ensure that they are in line with harassment-related concerns. 2. Educate your employees. Make it a mission to ensure all members of your workforce are aware of the drawbacks of harassment within your workspace. Train your staff to recognize situations of harassment as well as the necessary steps to take to avoid it. Figuring out how to deal with workplace harassment can be a massive issue. Workplace harassment is a regular situation in most workspaces and is a problem that should be avoided. Dealing with it can be stressful and sometimes even traumatic. It's important to ensure that your workplace is a cohesive, comfortable, and productive environment available for all workers. Did you find this video helpful? Kindly subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so that you'll be the first to see our updates. Also, leave your feedback, questions, or suggestions in the comment section below. And check the description below for more details. Visit our website, officema.com for more office content like this. Thanks for your time.